Welcome to Music Prose, where we share stories from beyond the stage. Join us as we explore the highs and lows of musician life and creative minds. Whether you're an aspiring artist or a seasoned pro, you'll find inspiration and insight and humor, definitely, and hopefully some sense of community here. I am your host, Crystal Cluley. We are broadcasting from the beautiful Blueberry Suite of Studio 770 in sunny Brea, California. Yes, isn't this room wonderful?
It really is.
Yes. So today, I have something a little bit different, just a little bit. My guest today is Ron Kobayashi.
Hello.
Hello, Ron. How are you?
Good. Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for coming. So, my last couple of guests have been from the kind of cover band scene. And so that's why I said you're a little bit different.
I'm always different. Sometimes not such good ways, I guess.
No, I think different is always good. It's good to be unique, right? We'll get into the difference between the jazz and cover band scenes a little bit later. But first, I want to know a little more about Ron.
Oh.
Tell me about Ron. You're a pianist. And
I'm a pianist.
Was it always piano for you?
Yeah, for the most part.
Yeah?
I started on an accordion, actually.
Oh,
so when I was
wow.
young, my parents got me accordion lessons from a guy that came door to door.
Oh, how fun.
And wanted me to play some kind of music because my dad was a saxophonist. Both my parents are from Hawaii, so when he was in Hawaii as a youth, he played jazz saxophone.
Oh, cool.
So when the accordion guy came around, he said, "Hey, that's keyboards. I think you might be interested in this." So I took it, didn't enjoy it as much as I thought I would, but was looking at the piano. And so
okay.
I took maybe a couple years of that, maybe a year, and then went into piano study and studied with Dorothy Neese and Ann Geib in Fullerton for a total of 10, 11 years
Wow.
of classical training. And then after that,
classical.
of classical.
Interesting.
And
Okay.
then after that, because my dad was a jazz saxophonist in Hawaii, I got into jazz. My dad showed me a lot about jazz, played jazz around the house constantly, Count Basie, Oscar Peterson. And so I really latched onto jazz. And I loved it because it's improvisatory. So
Right.
while I love classical, and classical is one of the great art forms, musical art forms of all time, no doubt.
Agreed. Agreed.
It's more of I think in a lot of ways, a composer's idiom because it's as a musician, you're trying to really communicate what the composer had on paper.
Right.
And there is definitely a bit of leeway you can take in terms of how you interpret the piece of music, but it's note for note. You really have to play what's on the paper.
Right.
And in jazz, it's exactly the opposite. You look at a basic chord change or a basic tune, and you can interpret the melody. You can even interpret some of the chords, and then you improvise on the chords. So that really attracted me. And so jazz is kind of self-taught. I took lessons. I went to Fulton College, took lessons from Dick Powell and some other people, Paul Smith. I took 2 or 3 lessons, but nothing really formalized. Jazz is really self-taught, just by listening a lot and transcribing and asking a lot of questions of musicians that I went to hear in my youth. And so that's really how I learned jazz. But the classical training was really helpful because it allowed me to at least have the technique to execute what I'd want to execute in jazz.
Okay, that actually makes a lot of sense to me. That's very interesting because I play piano too, but not like you. Nothing like you. I'm jealous. No, I was classically trained, and like you were saying, you really are supposed to play the notes on the page the way the composer intended.
Right.
And so to this day, because my piano teacher was very classical oriented and very strict, really, it is very difficult for me to improvise on that instrument. But vocally, and even saxophone, I played saxophone for a while too. I didn't know that about your dad. That is so great. Alto, tenor?
Alto mostly.
Mostly?
Yeah.
No, that was mine too. How fun.
Yeah.
Great. So those vocal and saxophone, I learned more by listening. And so it's much easier for me to improvise.
Right.
Because I didn't have that play what's written, drilled into my head.
Right.
So it's interesting that you were able to make that switch.
Yeah. And I have a lot of students now who are classically trained, and that is a tough transition to make because you're so used to, like you said, just reading what's on the page and being so, tied to it that when
Right.
someone says, okay, here are some chords and improvise something, the first reaction is, well, where do I even start?
Yeah.
Right.
Yes. Although I do think for me, as a singer and getting back into jazz these days for the last couple of years now, I like that I know my theory.
Yeah.
Right. So that classical training helped in that aspect, knowing what notes belong to what chords and scales and how they fit together so that when I am improvising, I know what works and what doesn't.
True. And one
Right.
added thing too is because of classical training at least can read grand staff.
Yes.
That really helps because sometimes you'll be in the
Yes.
studio and someone won't just bring in chord changes, but they'll bring in lines that they want you to play.
Exactly.
Or something in both hands that they want you to play. And at least if you have some bit of classical training, you can read the notes on the page, the grand staff, and be able to execute that. Whereas
Right.
I know some jazz musicians that only improvise and only know chords and how to improvise on those chords. But then if you put something for them to read, then they have trouble with that. So
They don't
that
know what to
classical
do,
training
right.
really helps you to be a full musician.
I agree 100%. And I teach vocals now myself, and I try to impress upon my students the necessity of reading at least some treble clef, for us singers,
Yes.
because if you're going to do a studio job or something like that, a lot of times, like you said, somebody's going to come in and they have a melody already written out for you. So you have to be able to read that. You have to be able to sight sing and that kind of thing. That's a whole other conversation. Someday we'll get into sight singing.
Yeah.
But that's not for us today. So you said that your father was a jazz musician and he got you the accordion lessons,
Yeah.
which is it's so funny to me. I have known you for, oh my gosh,
you imagine me with the
13 something.
accordion?
Yes, actually I can. I've known you for like 12, 13 years and I
Yeah.
never knew that about you.
Yeah.
See, you learn something new every day. Isn't that great? So that means your family then was supportive.
Very much so. I can't say enough about the support that I got from my parents. When I had a gig at Steamer's Jazz Club here in Fullerton, and they would, they live in Fullerton, but they would come out and support our efforts there, and have always been so supportive. I got my degree in political science from Cal State Fullerton, so for a while I was
That's
working
different.
at the County of Orange, a
Okay,
non-music gig.
That's very different.
And when I made the choice to leave that, which was a good paying, great job, I loved the job, and it was with the County of Orange, and I would have had great retirement, but I made this decision to go into music full time. They were, at first a little apprehensive, and said, "Are you sure you want to do this? Do you
Right.
know what you're in for with music?"
Yeah.
But when I made the decision, they were fully on board.
Well, that's so
And it's just
wonderful.
amazing. So yeah, I mean,
I'm
I
so
really
happy for
wouldn't be
you.
a musician if it weren't for them, obviously. So.
Oh, that's really beautiful. I had a different experience.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. My mom started me with, my mom played piano, so there was always a piano in the house, which is why I started tinkering at
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
a young
yeah,
age, and started me on violin lessons actually when I was 4 years old. So very early.
Yeah.
But again, well, it was a Suzuki method
Uh-huh.
of strings, and so it was more classical based again. But it was great because I was already reading by the time I started piano lessons at 8. I could
Yeah,
at least
that's
read treble, and so, but they were supportive of me doing those things throughout school. I was in the choir, the orchestra, and the marching and jazz bands with my sax. But when I said I wanted to do it for a career, they weren't supportive of that.
Mm.
Yeah, to them it was more of a hobby type thing. It
Right.
wasn't something I should consider making a living at. Yeah, and even to this day, I still get, if you had a real job,
Oh.
Yeah. So, and it's frustrating to me just because I think that even if they weren't crazy about the career choice, they could at least be proud of my work ethic.
Yeah.
Because I work hard to make this career choice work for me.
Absolutely. People have such a misconception about the work that it takes to make a living in
Right.
music. They think, oh, you're just playing
Right.
because we play music. not realizing all of the time behind a desk, writing up contracts, making phone calls, making sure you have the attire for that performance, make sure you have the proper equipment for that performance, making sure you return phone calls and texts and emails in a timely manner. I could go on and on and on about the things you need to do to make a living in music that have nothing to do with playing music.
Right. Actually, that's a really good segue. Maybe we should get into that a
okay.
little right now. Maybe we should go ahead and get into that. Because you already answered my other question I was going to ask about whether you had any other jobs or careers other than music.
Yeah.
So, yes, you kind of have to be a jack of all trades, right, to be a musician.
Absolutely.
You have to be a salesperson, a business person, right? All of these things.
Psychologist.
Oh, boy. Oh, yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You're dealing with other artists. And artists tend to be a little quirky sometimes, so that psychology comes into play. But you're absolutely right. Everything else, publicist, accountant.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, the amount of hats you put on as a professional performer is just mind-boggling.
And these days, social media manager too.
Yeah.
You and I both came up before before Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and all this fun stuff. Do you find yourself having trouble navigating those social media arenas? Because I do.
Yeah.
I have
I'll talk
a hard
to my
time.
son. He'll go, "Oh, you just do this." I go, "Oh, wow." But yeah, absolutely. It's a generational thing. I mean, we didn't grow up on it. But
it's a necessary, I think, marketing tool.
Completely necessary.
At this point.
Yes. Yeah. It's the new business card, right? It's the new,
right.
Even CD. Does everybody know what a CD is? But it's that, right? Everything's online. It's digital download. It's like, electronic promotional packages. It's all in that sphere, and it's no longer just handing someone a physical product necessarily. And you got to get used to it. That's the way things are done.
It has absolutely changed the industry.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. So you also mentioned that you have students.
Yes.
Can you talk to me a little bit about, we discussed your music education. So you had the classical.
Right.
And then you had other teachers that did the jazz thing with you. What do you teach? What
I teach
style
jazz improv, beginning to kind of intermediate, maybe a little advanced. And I will many times take students that have very little jazz knowledge. So they're usually classically trained, or they might be pop players, and they want to learn to improvise and learn to, play more extended chords and whatnot. And so I'll teach kind of the whole spectrum from how to play jazz chords, extended chords, altered extensions on chords, and then how to improvise on those chords.
How do you teach someone how to improvise?
So, there's chord tones and there's scales that go with certain chords, and to know that these are your choices, and how can you be creative at taking those choices and notes and having a logical, cohesive, artistically pleasing sounding melody. And that's a challenge, but if somebody has any kind of creativity in them, they can do it.
Right.
It's
but
just once
I would
they
think
know
it's
the
very
rules.
subjective.
Yes, absolutely. Right? Yeah, as all art, right?
Right.
So it's just really giving them the freedom and say, these are your tools. These are the notes you have to choose from. Now come up with something. And there are certain things you can think about, like what makes a good melody. Even a melody you hear on the radio, an interesting intervallic change, different rhythms on a melody, the phrasing of the melody, where you put spaces between the melodic line, all those things that go towards making a good melody. Right. You should think about when you're trying to improvise a good melody over a jazz tune, right? Same kind of concept.
Right. For those of you non-musicians who may be listening, intervallic, he's talking about intervals, like distances between notes.
Yeah,
it's okay. I love it. I love that you're getting technical. Our fellow jazz artists who watch this will be impressed. No, I think and I love that you said the space between, because there's a lot to be said for the notes you don't play as well.
Absolutely.
I know a lot of players, I've even said things to some of them. I'm like, okay, that is super amazing that you're so technically proficient and you can play 100 notes in 1 minute.
Yeah.
But, right?
Yeah.
What about letting it breathe?
Absolutely. I always tell my
know?
students it's like conversation in any language. There's always a variety of lengths to your sentence, and there's definitely punctuation. There's definitely space
Yes.
between your sentences and pauses that allow the receiver of what you're saying to comprehend what you're saying.
Yes.
Rather than having a run-on sentence that just goes and goes and goes and goes and never ends. And it's exactly the same
Yes.
thing with music. It's a form of communication. So you have to
Yes.
put those punctuation marks between your phrases to let it rest and breathe until the next phrase can be presented, so that then they can appreciate that. Same kind of concept, right? So that's
Yes,
why, like you
absolutely.
said, space and phrasing is so important
Right.
in jazz improvisation.
And I think when jazz artists or any artists are playing with one another and collaborating, like you said, it's a conversation.
Yeah.
So it's fun to be able to, and we do this sometimes, we trade licks back and forth.
Uh-huh.
You'll listen to what I sing and then you'll play on it, and then I'll
Right.
listen to what you played and play back. And to me, that's the joy of it.
Absolutely.
Really. And that's one of the things that I love most about jazz is that you have that freedom.
Yeah.
You mentioned the word free
Yeah.
a little bit ago, and it's very freeing because you're not expected necessarily to sound like something else.
Right.
You know what? That's going to take me to another question. Since we're there already, because so I was in a cover band for years, right? And we were pretty much expected to sound kind of like the original record, the original artist. And jazz, even though a lot of the songs we play are technically, quote, covers, right? We're not making new music,
Right.
new songs every time.
Right.
We don't call it covered. Now, why is that? Why do you think that is?
Because of the improvisational aspect.
Because of that.
Every time we play it, it's always different.
That's very
And
true.
we strive
Never
to
the
be
same
different.
song twice.
Yeah, we strive
Right.
to be different, right? Whereas a
Right.
cover band, you strive to be like the cover you're covering. And in jazz, if you sing it exactly like the singer that sung it, you kind of go, well, that's maybe a tribute band to this person, but it's certainly not jazz. Jazz is all about putting your own spin on it. Absolutely. And so that's to me what makes jazz so exciting. I always say it's a one-off. You'll never hear you, Crystal, when you sing a jazz tune, the audience will never hear you sing that exactly that way again. When they hear that and they capture that, it's the only time it's going to be sung like that, with the phrases or the turn of a phrase or the pauses you put that you didn't put last time, the different note choices you make. It will always be different. And the rhythm section will be different.
Right.
The people that accompany you, like me, I'm going to be playing chords differently every time because I don't remember what I did the first time, right? And you're not supposed to because you're improvising. So it's always, that's the thing that's exciting about jazz. I always say it's a one-off. So when you go to a concert, that's the only time you're going to hear the artist perform it that way. That's pretty cool.
No,
You can't
it's
say
very
that
cool.
about other types of music. Like you go to a
No, you
rock
really
concert,
can't.
they're basically going to play that tune the same way you heard it on the radio, for the most part.
For the most part. Yeah. Some of them take liberties.
yeah,
but
yeah.
You know what? Even as a listener, though, sometimes with some of those songs, I get so attached to how I heard the record,
Yeah.
right? That when they play it differently in concert, I'm a little,
Yeah.
I get a little, oh, wait. But sometimes it's fun when they do something that's cool, that's improvised, right? But
Yeah.
I'll fall in love with a guitar solo, and then when they play it differently in
Yeah,
concert,
right.
I'm like, wait a minute.
Yeah,
that's not. But yeah, jazz isn't like that. Now, we do call the tunes that we do standards,
Uh-huh.
right? Why do we call them that?
Because they just stood the test of time. You know, like Cole Porter, George Gershwin, Jerome Kern, for ever since the 1930s, going on 100 years, we've been playing and listening to those tunes. And the Beatles are becoming standards. Because
right.
even though they're a little later,
True.
a few decades later, they still exist and we still perform them and people still love listening to it. So that's what I consider a standard that just stands the test of time.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that explanation. Very good. So let me talk to you about some of your favorite gigs that you've done. You've been in the Orange County scene here
For a long time.
for a very long time. I think your trio, is it just celebrated 30 years?
30 years. Bobby Elefante, Steve Dixon. We've been together
Amazing.
30 years. Yeah. And recorded, numerous CDs and a DVD.
A DVD? I didn't
Yeah,
know
we
about the
did a
DVD.
DVD for a Japanese company when we were at Steamers.
Okay.
He wanted to kind of feature Japanese American artists in Japan and release it in Japan. So he came and did a multi-camera shoot, and it was really fun.
I bet. That's
yeah.
really neat.
But yeah, so I mean, a lot of gigs I think my favorite gig that was the most exciting to me was our trio got to play with the Pacific Symphony at Segerstrom's
Oh, wow.
Center for the Arts here in Orange County, which is our big performing arts center.
Yeah.
And we did the Gershwin show. So we backed up a vocalist named Deneen Dyson.
Oh, yes, I remember.
You know,
yeah,
Deneen.
yeah.
And
she's great.
she sings a lot with the symphony. And we did the kind of jazz portion of it with her. And then when we didn't play, then the whole orchestra played like Rhapsody in Blue and other things by Gershwin.
Wow.
And it was just such a thrill to be on that stage with that incredible orchestra and to be kind of the jazz portion of it as a rhythm section for her.
That is
that was
exciting.
really one of the highlights of my 35 years
career.
of playing.
Yes, your illustrious career. I love it.
But and we've done a lot of festivals. I played in New York and Florida, and we've gone out of town a little bit. But to tell you the truth, the gigs that really I remember and that bring a lot of joy to me are like gigs that I just do locally, like with you and with many, many others, right? Just to be with friends, people I love being with, to do music together, especially because we're playing jazz, to try different things.
Yes.
And to be able to go home at night and go like, wow, we tried that and that actually sounded pretty
worked.
cool.
Yes,
or
yes.
we tried it and that didn't really work and we learned something from that.
But we learned, right.
But to always be doing that is to me really exciting, and artistically it's pleasing for me to do that. And that happens on just regular gigs you do
around town
on a weekly basis. So I've been fortunate to do some bigger gigs here and there, but I always come back to those gigs like at the places we play regularly that really bring me a lot of joy.
Yeah. I think there's something very important to be said, right, for having a steady gig like that, having a residency per se,
Absolutely.
having something to count on, right, as opposed to worrying about when the next tour or whatever is coming up. Right? We were talking about that a little before we came on air, about the difference between trying to be a touring musician versus being a sort of homebody local musician. Right? Yeah. And you've had many residencies, and some of them for a very long time. Right? But that's a testament to you, to your personality, because it takes a lot to get along with not only the clientele, but the owners, managers, whatever that you have to deal with, because again, that's the business side. Right. So to be able to keep your job, right, for such a long time. And then also that the people still want to come and hear and listen. And like you said, it's never the same song exactly twice.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
So tell me about your longest residency. What was your longest
Probably...
one?
We were at Steamers for about 20 years, which is a long time.
That is a long time.
I've been at Bayside now for 15.
Wow, okay.
Which you do with me.
Yes.
And then before then I was at Bistango, which is the sister restaurant at Bayside. I was there for 10 years. So those are kind of my longest. I've been playing at my church for 35 years.
35 years, wow.
And I guess that's my longest gig.
I guess so.
Yeah.
You were at a hotel for a while. I mean, when I first met you and we were both teaching at the Music Factory. That's where we met. How funny is that, right? We met teaching for the same little music school. I don't do that anymore, but and you don't either. You're not at that school, but you do still teach.
I teach. Yeah, I teach at like OSHA, the Orange County School of the Arts.
Right. Okay. Do you do private lessons also?
And private lessons, many private lessons.
Yeah. How long have you been at OSHA?
It's going on like, 13, 14 years, probably, maybe a little longer.
Excellent. Yeah. All right. So, but I remember, like I said, when I first met you teaching, I thought there was a hotel thing. It was a hotel lobby.
Probably.
Was it? You don't remember either?
Yeah, there's so many gigs. I'm sure there was. Yeah.
I thought that there was something that was very steady. Or was it a mall? Or
I played at Nordstrom's. I played piano at Nordstrom's.
Maybe that's what it was for me.
Yeah, during the day.
Right? Isn't it cool how things used to be like that?
Yeah.
But it's sad that so many places don't do that anymore.
Well, that's why, like, we were talking about just making a living at music.
Right.
You really have to be able to do many, many different things in music. If you say, I just want to do piano bar, you may make a living at it, and it's quite possible.
You may.
But what I
But
think
you're
is much
limited.
more guaranteed is when you say, okay, I'm going to do some solo piano work. I'm going to work with the trio. I'm going to work with vocalists. I'm going to do wedding receptions where I play like solo organ or piano for that. I do some teaching. Like another example is like I
Right.
did this thing called sidelining, which you, as a musician, pretend like you're playing on movies and TV. So I just did this thing for Netflix that's on now, and I'm in the
You're
band
going to
scene.
tell us what it is so we can.
Yeah, it's brother son. There's a short. We spent all day filming, and it's literally like 2 minutes in the whole thing.
Right.
But and I'm in the
course.
band scene, and there's an interesting gig, and many musicians do that, and that's a big part of their income. But you just kind of stand and you pretend like you're playing. And the union has made a contract, I guess, with Hollywood that if you portray a musician, you have to have a real musician, which is great for us.
That is
So you can't have an
excellent.
actor play a background musician.
Play a musician. It has to be a real
Real
musician.
musician.
Yeah. I
So-
actually did one of those too many years ago. Well, not many, 5-ish, 6 years ago. I did an all-day shoot for a commercial,
Yeah.
and we had to pretend
Yeah.
to play the Macarena
Oh, yeah,
for
yeah, yeah.
8 hours.
Yeah. But it's
Yeah, that was a
income,
tough one, but it was income.
right?
Yes,
it's
100%.
the point
yes.
that, if
have
you
to
only do one,
diversify.
you have to diversify and
Right.
open yourself up to doing many, many different things. And when you do that, then you can make a living at music. You really can, but you really have to diversify.
Right. Yeah, like you said, many hats.
Yeah.
Have you worked with any major artists?
Yeah, Mel Torme kind of being in
That's
terms
right.
of
Yes, I remember that.
Margaret Whiting, who's like an old from the 40s. She was a kind of a big band swing singer.
Yeah.
A lot of kind of jazz folks, Tom Scott. But one of the things that I always tell people about the Mel Torme, it was like one big concert with him. And I was very young at that time. And somehow I got called to do this with other really great musicians much older than I was. And I was really
Because
frightened.
you're amazing.
Oh, I don't know. I was just really frightened. And
Sure, it can be nerve-wracking.
and he was pretty intense. And he called me on something I was playing in rehearsal that wasn't in the music that I wasn't paying attention to.
Oh.
But that lesson with him, especially because I was so intimidated and just so frightened about the gig, really taught me something. And that was that you really need to pay attention to all the details of performing music. You can't just look at a chart and go, oh, okay, there's a chord change. I'm just going to do whatever. Like if it calls for something specific, do it, because you never know when the person that you're backing or the person that wrote the chart is listening and having such an incredible ear like Mel Torme and hearing over the band that you're playing a note in your chord that isn't in the chart, and they can hear
Right.
that, they're going to call you on it. And so it turned out to be a really great learning experience for me, that about detail in music, that
Yes.
don't take anything for granted and really pay attention to those things, because someone may be listening and you may be caught doing something that you're not asked to do in that situation.
Right.
Don't take things for granted.
Right. And it is very detail-oriented when you're working for someone else like that. But when it's you, right?
Yeah.
You are very creative and just improvisational, and you have written some music of your own, right?
Yes.
So tell me a little about that.
So
What's
I
your
write-
creative process?
Yeah, mostly for my trio. I don't really write vocal music, so most of it is, although a couple things people put lyrics to, but for the most part, it's instrumental music. And I really, oddly, I think a lot of people that write music, when they talk to me, they kind of look at me puzzled, because they go, really, that's the way you do it? But I always start with the groove. I never start like with a melody in my head or a chord progression. I always start with like a groove, like, wow, this groove would be kind of cool. And that kind of dictates then kind of what the chord progression will be.
Interesting.
And
So
then
it's a little more about
finally,
feel?
Yeah. Finally, after that, then a melody that fits over that chord progression, which is
Okay.
kind of backwards, I think. A lot of people come up with the melody first,
Right. That's
and
true.
then they go, oh, here's the chords to the melody, and then, oh, what's the groove for it, right?
Right.
And I just it seems I feel most comfortable writing that way. I should probably try a different way, and I might come up with something better.
Or
It
just
might be-
different.
Or different, yeah.
Just different. Different is good.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Now, I know of other artists or musicians who will do a riff first, right? Still have a riff in their head
Right.
and
Right.
nothing else, but then they have to build around it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Do you ever do that, or is it?
Yeah, I've tried, and again, it just seems the other way flows a little easier for some reason.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Hey, our crazy creative minds
Yeah.
all work differently, don't they?
Yeah.
Have you had any major like awards or accolades?
Our trio was voted like best jazz group. This is many, many years ago in the 90s, I think, by readers of the OC Weekly, which was a local paper.
Great.
And I think the Asian Business Association of Orange County honored me with something. But
Something.
yeah, it was something.
Something or other.
Yeah, not really, and I don't know. It'd be so great to get a Grammy or something, right?
Right.
But I've often thought that just making a living playing music, even without the big accolades or big awards, is huge because there's so many people that can't make a living at music or don't. And so just the fact that like I'm going to go to work tonight and I'm going to do a gig, and then next day I'm going to go to work and I'm going to be playing music and getting paid for it is huge. And we can't really lose sight of that. We really got to appreciate the fact that that is happening.
Yes.
Whether or not we get awards, right?
No, 100%. I'm with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when I was younger, I thought I was going to be a, rock star, pop star, or whatever.
Yeah.
Travel the world and be famous and yada yada, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not disappointed, actually, that those things did not happen. Oddly enough, I'm not disappointed because, like you said, it's the joy of playing and creating. And even if I'm not a writer. I don't really write music. I've tried a few times, and I've written a couple things that I don't hate. I'm very hard on myself when I write. I'm my own worst critic. I think a lot of us are.
Yeah.
Because it is so personal.
Right.
But I am just. It's a different kind of success. Right? It's a different definition of success to understand that you are doing something that is not easy to do and not a lot of people get to do it.
Right.
So it's rewarding in its own way to just be able to go out and do what you love and make a living at it.
Right.
And there are times, I'm sure for you and definitely for me, where it still feels like a job, and you may get up one day and you're tired or bummed out or whatever it is. Some things are going on, and I don't want to go to work today. Yeah. But the joy of what we do is that it doesn't matter if I wake up feeling that way. When I get to the gig, and the music starts, it's all gone.
Yes.
Do you feel that way too?
Yeah. Which is sometimes people ask me, how come you don't take? Because I don't take many vacations.
Right.
And they go, why don't you take vacations from it? And I say, I honestly believe that when I go to work, I enjoy the people I work with and I enjoy the music I play. And so that in a way is kind of is fun for me and kind of like a vacation. And so
I love that mindset. Yeah.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
So I'm on vacation a lot. Now, as we had mentioned before, not the business end of it. That's a totally different thing. That is total work, and I dread it, and it's a drag.
Same.
But in order to do that part where you play music with your friends, in order to get there, you got to do that.
You have to do the other
it's
stuff.
Worth it to me to go through that pain of doing that, right? But when you're there like you said, you so accurately stated that, as when you arrive and you're actually performing the music, it's wonderful. It really is.
Yeah.
And so, taking a vacation becomes less important because you're enjoying what you're doing.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Even though I need to take some vacations just for my mental health. But
Oh, mental health is a whole other thing.
Yeah.
No, I don't know how to put it other than the euphoria that we experience when we're performing, creating, grooving. And I don't have a lot of life outside of gigs and music, but I don't feel the need in a sense most of the time, because what I have when performing, that's family. Like, you're family to me. We work together and you're family to me. And we may not see each other a lot outside of gigs.
Yeah.
Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't, but that's okay, because when we come together to do what we do, right? It just works.
Yeah.
There's just this well, like I said, euphoria. It's a euphoria that happens, and it lifts us all up.
Right.
And it lifts the audience up. And then when the audience is enjoying and grooving, and they're giving that energy back to us,
That's the best.
It's energizing, and that's right. And I almost feel bad for people who don't get to experience that, right?
Yeah.
Because it's a joy that not every person gets to experience.
Yeah.
So we're lucky.
We really are.
We're fortunate that we can do what we do, and that people want to see us do it.
Yeah.
Right.
And too, that's why I always at gigs try to thank the people that come to hear us, because it's because of them that we're able to do what we do and enjoy what we do. Because if no one came to see us and support our musical activities, we wouldn't be doing it.
Yes.
So we really owe so much to all those loyal people who come out, like with even just my trio. We've been together 30 years, but they would come and pack steamers, then we'd play something else. They'd come out. And they could have done so many other things during the day, but they take the time to come and support us.
And yes.
That is the most valuable thing. And I love everybody. And I thank everybody that does that, because, like I said, we couldn't do it for a living if it weren't for them.
No, absolutely. Yeah, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
And it's a form of acceptance, right? And love in a way.
Yeah.
So I'm with you 100%. I live for that. I live for those moments. And the moments on stage when we're, like we said earlier, kind of having those musical conversations.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
I know you probably think I'm silly sometimes, but when we're playing together, and if I hear you do something, I'm like, oh, okay, and then I'll go somewhere, and then we're like, and I feel silly, but it's exciting.
Yeah.
Right?
That's the spontaneity of it.
It's right.
Really cool.
So I think we've kind of talked about all the things that we had in mind. Was there anything else that we've missed that you wanted to say? Well, you know what? I was going to ask you about staying physically healthy, because you do gig quite a lot.
Yeah.
And I know that recently you had a wrist injury.
Yeah, jogging
right, which
accident.
is the worst thing in the world for a pianist, right? So how do you combat that? How much time did you have to take off?
I took off. Man, I don't even remember now, but it was maybe a couple weeks. I couldn't play, and things happen in life, and injuries occur, and sometimes
sadly they do. Yeah.
But I did physical therapy and do exercise, do stretches, which I think is probably good for every musician.
Oh, absolutely.
And then I try to jog a little bit I'm a super slow jogger. When I say jog, I mean fast walking.
You mean like mall walking?
Yeah.
These young kids these days don't know what that is.
Yeah. But I try to jog every morning.
Yeah, but see, that's what got you hurt. See?
But you're right, see? So I'm trying to take care of myself, and it gets me hurt. Not a smart thing to do, but yeah.
You can try to go be healthy and go jogging, and then you end up injured. See?
But
That's why I don't jog.
Just one important point I think to make about that is musicians really need to kind of put in an extra effort to take care of their health. Yes. Because as you know, our schedules are weird. We come home late at night.
Yes.
We're eating dinner at odd hours. Sometimes we're not able to eat because we're going between gigs. We're in a car, traveling from one place to the other. And so our health many times is compromised. So just
absolutely
a word out to everybody who's a musician or wants to be a musician. Just try to really be cognizant of what you're eating and trying to do a little bit of exercise just to keep yourself healthy, because the work, especially if you work a lot, the workload sometimes precludes you from doing the things you need to do to take care of yourself. And that's, a lot of musicians die young. Mm-hmm. And it's, I think, a lot because of the lifestyle. So please.
It is not an easy life. It's a joyous thing, but it is not an easy life.
Right.
Absolutely not. And I'll go from students straight to a gig, and then I've learned to keep snacks in the car.
I'll
me
keep
too. Little biscuits or granola bars and things in the car at all times, because I may not have time to even go through a drive-through. I may just have to run one place to another, and try to keep water all the time. For me, being a singer, I have to stay hydrated, or my voice, my body is my instrument.
Right.
So it's kind of important. And yours is too, in a way, right? Because you have to have your hands in good enough shape to be able to do what you do.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that was frustrating for you to not be able to play for a while.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
hard. With as much as we love what we do,
Yeah.
to not be able to do it is scary.
It really is.
And that's the other reason to really take care of
Yeah.
yourself, because you don't want to end up in that place where you still want to and you just can't.
Right.
All right. That would be the saddest thing I think of all.
Yeah.
You know.
I hope to play till I die. I
hope
really
so
do,
too.
right? You
Right.
know? It's like, that's a wonderful thing about music is, you know, U.B. Blake, who was what, 90 or 100, 99, 100, he was still playing till the end.
Right, Tony Bennett, who we just
Tony
recently
Bennett, yeah.
lost, what, 90 something?
Yeah. You know, it's something
Still
you
singing,
can do
still-
the rest of your life. And if you love it,
Right.
it's the greatest thing you can do. So we just got to, as long as, you know, you don't injure the things that are going to allow you to perform, you can still do it.
Right. Right. And that's the importance, like you said, of taking care of yourself
Yeah.
to be able to continue
Right.
to do what we do.
Right.
I just did a gig Monday night and I didn't get home until, I don't know, 10:30, 11 o'clock. And that's what time I'm eating dinner.
Yeah.
You know, instead of most people are going to bed by then.
Exactly.
You know, we're just getting home and
Yeah.
having dinner at that hour. So
We regularly call each other right at 10, 11,
You're
at 12
right,
at night.
right.
And other musicians, and I know they're up. So I'm going to call them and ask them the question I was going to ask them rather than waiting till 9 o'clock the next morning.
Right,
Because that's
exactly.
those are the normal hours.
Right.
Yeah.
And I know your schedule well enough at this point. I know where you are on certain days because of those residencies that you're. And I'm like, okay, well, I can't text him or call him right now because he's at this place doing the thing. But I know he's done by 9:30.
Right,
so,
right.
so yeah, what's coming up for you? You're at Bistango on
Bistango on
Wednesday nights.
Wednesdays.
Every Wednesday, right?
Yes.
Weekly.
Bayside Thursday and Friday. You are with me the second and fourth Fridays.
Fridays. That is Newport Beach. So
Newport
we've got
Beach.
Bistango in Irvine on Wednesdays. We have you have the Bayside on Thursdays and
and
Fridays.
Fridays.
And yes, I'm at the Bayside with Ron every other second and fourth Fridays.
Les Amis in Fullerton
that's
with my
right.
trio. It's
The
kind
Ron
of a residency
Kobayashi
the
trio,
first and
yes.
third Saturdays of the month.
First and third Saturdays.
And then
right?
at the Drake and Laguna, usually 3, maybe sometimes 4 times a month.
Right.
Sometimes with you, sometimes with Andrea Miller, sometimes and then with Brian Cabrera, we
Right.
do a duo.
You do a duo.
So
We have our monthly at the Drake
yeah.
with Jerry Mandel,
Oh right, and
Right.
with Jerry Mandel, the great Jerry Mandel.
Irvine Barclay Theater Jazz Band.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
I don't know why it sounds like it should be,
Yeah.
very pompous. It's not. Jerry's not pompous at all. He's fun, a lot of fun to work
He's
with.
the greatest guy.
Yeah. He's super fun. So we do a monthly, what is it, the second Tuesday
Something
of each
like
month,
that.
I
Yeah,
believe,
yeah.
at the Drake. We should know this because we're on the gig.
Yeah.
But yeah, second Tuesday of each month at the Drake in Laguna Beach.
And Jerry used to run the Performing Arts, Orange County Performing Arts Center, and the
Right.
used to run the Barclay.
The Barclay
Now
Theater.
Craig is running it. Craig Springer. But,
Another sax
yeah.
player.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of enjoyable gigs with them, and then and don't forget we're going to be at Disneyland, the hotel.
Yes, I know. I'm super excited
coming up
about
in
that.
August. So
I
yeah,
haven't been to Disneyland in several years. Yeah, I subbed with an 80s cover band
oh
that played there, 8-ish years ago, something like that. So, but when you perform, I don't know, have you performed there many times before? Or?
no, my first time is going to be this Saturday.
This Saturday.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, so you'll have to tell me about that.
Yeah,
Afterwards. So with this cover band, they played on what was Tomorrowland Terrace at
Oh,
the
yeah,
time.
yeah,
I
yeah.
think it's the Star Wars, I can't talk, Star Wars area now. But it's a stage that comes up out of the ground.
Right.
Right? So when you're performing there, they take you in the back entrance. You have to go through the employee entrance or the backs of buildings, right? And you literally go underground because that's where your green room is and the stage comes up.
Right.
And then you can only see whatever you can see of the park.
Yeah. From
Right,
there.
while
yeah.
you're up on the
Yeah.
stage, and then
and then you
lowers
go back down. here.
So I have performed there, I think maybe 5 or 6 times. I
Yeah.
did that gig, subbing
Yeah.
with that band, but never saw the park.
Ah!
I'd never been to the rest of the park. I've never been to Disneyland. How sad is that?
Oh my god! You've been in the basement of
I've
the
been
park.
in the basement. Yes, I was underground in the dungeons. The dungeons of
man.
Disney. Oh,
Yeah,
oh.
Uh-oh.
That's a whole thing.
Watch what you say. Disney is listening.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. That's not at tomorrow. It's not even actually in the park.
It's at
is
the
it?
Grand California Hotel,
It's at the
which is half in
hotel.
the park and half out, so people can actually come from outside. You just there's
Oh,
a
so you don't
certain
have to be a
section
park
that
guest to.
yeah
Okay,
that
good to
is
know.
the park apparently, so you can't go past that point.
Oh, I see. Okay, but so general public
Yeah.
can still come in.
Yeah.
Oh, good to know. Good to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's gonna be fun.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we got some holidays coming up too.
Yeah.
I like making you dress up for Halloween.
Yeah. Exactly.
I think that's so funny that in all of your career, nobody had gotten you to put on a costume before.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. I don't think so.
Well, I feel very special because I've gotten you to dress up twice now.
Yeah. Once as a priest.
Once as a priest, yes.
Oh,
and
man.
somebody at the restaurant actually thought you were a
Yeah.
priest. That was great.
He actually told his wife, "Honey, look, a priest is going to play piano for us tonight."
See, that's how well you sold it.
Yeah.
And then I come in my red dress and my devil ears,
Yeah.
you know. Then I ruined the whole
Oh,
thing.
man.
But so yeah, we were a priest and a devil. And
You
then
got to have a sense of humor.
oh, you have
do
to.
music.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the year before that, we were we did the 20s thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I'm hoping that I get us another Halloween gig
Yeah,
this
yeah.
year. I'm working on that. I'll see what I can make you
Okay.
dress up. Oh, well, it has been such a joy having
Yeah,
you here,
thank
Ron.
you, Crystal, for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much
Yeah.
for joining me and talking about your life and your career. And I love playing with you. So I hope that anybody
Likewise.
out there will come and see Ron, whether it's with me or with anybody else. Ron is just an absolutely fantastic human being and pianist, and just an absolute joy to be around and to work with.
Thank
So,
you.
yeah. Thank you to my guest, Ron Kobayashi. If you are interested in finding out more about Ron, you can follow him. You have your own website, yes?
Yeah, it's a kind of convoluted ad. So just Google my
Okay.
name. It's Ron Kobayashi, and then probably the website will come up.
Right.
And other things.
And other things?
Yeah.
Oh, goodness. And you're on Facebook, Instagram. That Instagram, it's R Koba, right?
Yeah.
R Koba Music,
Yeah.
I believe, is how we can follow you on
Music,
Instagram.
yeah.
Right? I am Crystal Cluley, once again, and you can find me at Instagram, Facebook at Crystal Cluley, or crystalcluley.com. I'm terrible at keeping up with my calendar on my website, but working on that. I'm working on getting better. That's one of those things like we were talking about with the whole social media thing, man. It's tough for me to keep up with all of that.
Yeah.
I'm terrible at remembering to have content too, because when I'm performing, I'm in the moment.
Oh, yeah.
And I always forget to take pictures or videos, and
Yeah.
you know, and all these other singers are out there posting left and right, and I've got nothing. But
Yeah.
it's because I'm just doing what I do,
Right.
right? So to me, there's something to be said for that too, for just being able to be in the moment.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, we have to be salespeople too. Anyway, as I'm selling you this podcast, you can check out Studio 770 at studio770.com. If you are interested in starting a podcast of your own, they have this wonderful room, this suite setup, lights, cameras, engineer, everything all set up for you. It is a beautiful, beautiful thing. I'm not a techie kind of person to want to be able to do this myself, you know. I don't have the fancy mics and the lights and all this stuff.
Very
so
cool.
it's
Yeah,
really great
really
that they
nice.
have this here. So if you're interested in starting your own podcast, please visit studio770.com. And until next time, you can like, subscribe. If you have ideas on who I should have to talk with, let me know. Until then, keep the music playing and the stories flowing.